Hi, this is Jeremy Jansen, and I'd like to welcome you to the September 2009 issue of Reason Wizardry. This time we're going to be talking about processing and routing audio. And that's got kind of more important than ever with the advent of record, because now we're able to process live audio, whether that be live instruments or voice, whatever. We're not going to actually use record in these tutorials because I'm not sure which of you have it, but we're going to use Reason and we're going to use loops, full mixes, and you can easily take the techniques here and move them to record and use them on your live audio as well. So let's get started. So as I said, we're going to talk about processing audio in this issue. And first I'm going to just talk about what that means in the context of these tutorials. You can call audio processed when you're just taking an audio stream and adding an effect on the end. So here we have a Dr. Rex loop, and we can just add, say, a phaser. Okay, so that's processed. But I don't find that a really interesting application, especially compared to what you can do with Reason's modular environment. What really gets me interested in audio processing is splitting the audio and then processing it. So we can split the audio using Reason in a variety of ways and then put it back together, re-sculpt it into something new. So that's what we're going to be talking about this month, and we're going to split the audio in 4 different dimensions. The first way we're going to split it is frequency. Okay, so we're going to split up this drum loop on the basis of frequency. And what that means is that we're going to split up the drum loop into different frequency bands. So we're going to split it into 4 bands. 1 for bass, 2 for mid-range, and 1 for high-end. So our effect device is this first combinator. Let's open it up. I've already added 4 stereo imagers and 1 mixer. We're using stereo imagers because they have a built-in frequency crossover. We're not using any of the stereo features, but they have a crossover that can split up audio into 2 streams. I'll flip the rack around here and you can see they have 2 outputs, 1 regular audio output and 1 separate out. So we can use that to split up audio into different bands. And you could use as many of these as you wanted. You could split up into 16 different bands. You could split up into 32. Obviously, that's going to be increased complexity and increased CPU load, but the sky's the limit for this technique, so you could just keep experimenting. So, how does it work? Let's flip this back over, and you can see that I haven't done any routing yet. And I haven't really done much audio routing in general in Wizardry yet. So, I'm going to do this, you can notice, with the cabling minimized. It's just a lot easier to focus on what's going on with it minimized. And I'm going to try to do this fairly slow so that you can comprehend all of it. But I'd love your feedback on how this part of the tutorial goes, because this is just kind of new material for us. So the first thing is the 2 devices section right here on the combinator. That means that's where our drum loop is going to come out of. We've got our audio routed into the combinator already. You can see right there, our Dr. Rex is going into combi input. And then 2 devices is where the stream goes from the combinator to the first device. So we're going to route that into our first stereo imager. And now I'll show you how the crossover works. We can basically just set our frequency. We're going to set it to around 200. And that frequency determines the split point. So if we set it to 200, that means that we're going to have a split of everything under 200 and everything over 200. We're going to set those to different outputs. So the first way we do that is to solo low band. That means that just the low band that's under 210 is going to be sent from our audio output. So we're going to take that and we're going to send that to our first mixer channel. And now we still have this separate out. And if we set this little slider on the separate out to high band, that means we're going to just get the high band coming out of there. And we're going to send that to the next stereo imager. So now we've got to set up the crossover on the second stereo imager. So for our mid-range, we want everything up until 840. So now, as before, we'll solo the low band and high band on the back. We'll send that audio output to our mixer and take the separate high out to the next stereo imager. We'll just set up these switches ahead of time. High band on the back, low band on the front, and then set up our crossover. We'll go to 2.51 kilohertz for our upper mids. So main audio output to the mixer, separate output to the next stereo imager. So this one's a little bit different because it's the final crossover in a chain. So we don't need to use the separate out because there's going to be nothing after this. So we're going to just use the audio output to the fourth mixer channel. And we're going to set the crossover to exactly the same as the third crossover. And we're going to go solo high band instead. So that means we're just sending 2.51 kilohertz and up to the fourth mixer channel. So now we have our mixer channel set up. Let's hear what it sounds like. Play our drum loop. And by soloing these channels, you can hear what we've got. So there's our bass, low mids, high mids, and high end. So now once we've got these as separate mixer channels, there's a variety of things we can do with it. We could add different EQ curves to each channel. We could pan them separately. So we could hard pan the low and high mids away from each other. Pan the highs just off to the side a bit. Of course, we could add different send effects to each channel. But most interesting is adding insert effects. So there's a few different things we could do. Well, actually, there's many different things we could do. I'm going to just show you kind of two approaches to it. One really interesting one is adding different delays for different frequency ranges. So let's try that first. So we'll take a 4-step delay on the high end. We'll pan these off a bit. A 3-step delay on the upper mids. a 5-step delay on the lower mids, and no delay on the low end because, well, that can muddy up our sound a little bit. So you can get really unique delay sounds by using different delay settings per frequency band. But beyond just delay, you can use this for any effects. We could add different distortion per frequency band, which is a great technique, multi-band distortion. It's really nice to keep that distortion from muddying up your bass. So you could just add distortion to the mid-range, and then you won't get that muddy bass, and you also won't get that really crispy, too hot high end that comes with too much distortion on your high end. So we could give that a quick shot here. So as well as just putting it on the mid-range, we can have two different distortions, of course. So we could say buzz on the low and fuzz on the high and tube on the low mids. Could also use some body resonance, different body resonances. And then you could follow this up with the delays as well, or you could say throw on a phaser onto the high end. And maybe compression onto the low end. So by splitting up your sound this way, you have a lot of different options for affecting it in a whole variety of ways. So I've saved a version of this patch that's not exactly the same as this one. It uses the 4 bands, but the effects in place are different. So you can start from that and work your own hybrid multi-band frequency split patch. And just keep experimenting. Alright, next I'm going to show you how to split up an audio stream based on the stereo position or panning. So that means we can take, say, a loop, drum loop, whatever, and split it up into different chunks based on the stereo positions. So we can have one chunk that's the extreme right edge of the stereo position. You could think of it like a pie, and splitting up the stereo signal into different chunks. So for some assistance on how to do that and an example sound, we're going to first start with Synthetic Kits Combinator made by Tom Pritchard called For a Guy Called Gerald. So we'll first listen to that just dry. So you can hear it's got some stereo movement going on already. You can't split something up based on stereo positioning if it doesn't have stereo information to begin with. This technique doesn't work for mono signals. Okay, so now we're going to open up our pan split combinator here. And I'm going to flip it around, and I've already routed up this one because it's fairly complex, but I'm going to explain exactly what's going on to you. Keep in mind it's bypassed right now, so we're not hearing its effect. Okay, once again we start at 2 devices. That's our initial signal that's going to go to the effect. So the first thing we're doing is splitting up the audio using a spider audio into 4 identical signals. So if you haven't used a spider before, it's pretty simple. We won't talk about the merge part right now, but for splitting, you just send your signal that you want to be split to these first inputs, and then the 4 further outputs are identical. So that's just 4 identical signals. So we've sent these identical signals to the inputs on 4 small mixers. Okay, and on these mixers, we've set the pan position differently. So you can see this one is hard panned left, hard panned right, kind of a mid left, mid right. And now, of course, you could use any positions you wanted. This is just an example. And you could split into more different positions as well. Okay. I'm going to turn the effect on now, but it's still not completely activated. Mostly you just heard it get louder, probably. Just go down to this mixer here. And you can see we've got 4 mixer channels, and these are corresponding to the 4 small mixers. So you can hear there's our hard panned left signal, hard panned right, mid left, mid right. So at this point, now that we've got those different signals in the mixer, just like the frequency split, you could apply new panning to them, EQ, send effects. There's all those basic things you can do once you get these separate signals in the mixer, or you can apply insert effects, and I've already done that. And now I'm going to just turn off some of the bypasses so you can hear what it sounds like. So now we've got 2 different scream effects. On the first 2 channels. And we've got a phaser effect on the 3rd channel. And a synced reverse reverb on the 4th channel. So you could add whatever effects you like. Let's just play with these screams a bit, get something a bit more extreme. Tweak this phaser a little bit. Sync its rate to every 2 bars. So there we have our pan split. Let's bypass that and listen to the original sound. So it's yours from here to tweak, add whatever different effects you'd like, and try it with some different sounds, and once again, experiment. We've split our audio up on the basis of panning and frequency. Now, a logical next step is time. So first, we're going to be working with the audio from another synthetic kits combinator called Low Fear by myself. So let's listen to what that sounds like on its own. So kind of a film score-ish patch. Alright, let's open up our combinator, figure out how we're going to split this up. Maybe you can already guess how we're going to split it up. We're going to use matrix devices. There's sync to tempo. Okay, keep in mind we're bypassed here, once again, so you can't hear the effect. So, to start off, it's just like the pan split. We're using a spider audio to split the signal up into 4 different, identical duplicate outputs. So we're just splitting it into 4 duplicate streams. And we're sending those 4 duplicate streams. Move this spider back down here to 4 different effects. So we've got the first stream going to a scream, the second one going to a unison, the third one going to an RV7000 setup with a hall reverb. And the fourth one is going into a vocoder set up in EQ mode. Haven't really talked about that yet. You can just consider that a different type of filter for now. Just affects the sound in a subtle way. Okay, and so the outputs for all of those 4 effects are going to these 4 mixer channels. Now you can see we've got their volume for all 4 channels set to 0. Why is that? That's because the matrix devices are controlling their volume. Now we haven't talked about CV routing at all yet, and this is pretty basic stuff. Hopefully it's not overwhelming. We're using the curve mode in the matrix, set to 4 half-note steps, and we've got a full value on different steps here, as you can see. So the first matrix is step 1, step 2 on the second, step 3 on the third, and step 4 on the fourth. And so that curve, that full value of 127, is being sent out to each respective mixer channel. So 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4. And we've turned the level CV knob up on each channel. So what that means is that on the first step of this sequence that all 4 matrices are playing, this matrix is going to send 127 value CV to this channel and raise its volume to 100%. And then on the second, third, and fourth step, it will be at 0. So I'm going to turn this combinator on partially. It's just got louder. You haven't heard any of the effects, but you'll see what's going on here. So basically, we're just cycling through these 4 mixer channels in time on beat. So now you'll hear what's going on when I unmute the effects. So you can hear we've got our scream effect on channel 1, followed by unison, followed by reverb, followed by vocoder. So this type of split is extremely configurable. Turn that down a little bit. Because of course we can change the steps here any way we'd like. We could speed up the steps. Let's just give that a quick shot. Of course, we could use as many steps as we'd like. We could use 8 different effects. Realistically, 14 effects is kind of the practical limit, considering that's how many mixer channels we've got. But we could use 14 different effects. Maybe 8 would be a good number, considering that's a nice musical division. We can vary the amount on the steps so that some steps actually have partial mixer channel volume. So I'll show you what that looks like. So we could actually use the first and fourth matrix to make up for some of those 2 lower steps now. So we could add some of the fourth step and some of the first. So it's a little bit hard to see what's going on that fast. We'll slow the sequence back down. So first step, and now the second and third share effects. And you can see why. So splitting up audio on the basis of time is just a great and flexible technique. Depending on the effects that you use, and depending on how you split up the time and mix it, there's just a huge amount of variation that you can add to a sequence. You could pan different steps. There's just so much room for sound design and interesting musical application here. So Obviously, this combinator is saved for you, and you can experiment and probably create something a lot cooler than this one. Alright, our final dimension that we're going to split up audio on is based on key position. That's MIDI key. So depending on what key we push on our keyboard, we're going to have different types of processing going on. Now, this is by far the most advanced combinator that I'm going to be showing you, and it's got a lot of CV routing that I'm not going to go over in detail because we just haven't really got that initial CV basis to describe that to you. So this is going to be a little bit of a simplified look, but you are going to have this patch to look at on your own, and we are going to talk about it more in a later issue when we look at CV more in depth. For now, let's get into it. We're going to start with some audio, once again from Synthetic Kits, and this one's called Ceremonial, and it's by myself. So let's play that first off. Okay, so what we want to do is, depending on what key we push, starting on C1, we want a different effect on the audio. It's funny, I just got an email a couple days ago about a large German plugin company releasing an effect very similar to this. This wasn't inspired by their effort. I've been working on this for a while. It's just funny timing. Some of you might have got that email and you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so let's flip things around and see what's going on here. First thing we have to do is split up our audio. Now, I'm going to ask you to ignore the Spider Audio CV devices here and just look at what we're familiar with already. So 2 devices, that's going to this Spider Audio to split up into 4 streams. But in this case, I wanted a little bit more than 4 streams. So what do you do in that case? Well, you have to use another Spider Audio. Ignore the merge section for now. And you can see here that I've taken one of the outputs from the first Spider and sent it into a second Spider split. So what we actually have in total is 1, 2, 3 outputs. 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 outputs. And what that adds up to for this patch is 5 different effects and then the dry signal. So we want to be able to push a key that triggers an effect, and then when we let our hand off the key, it's going to just play the dry signal again. So we need those 6 different signals to provide 5 effects and 1 dry signal. I'm going to just turn down this mix a tiny bit here. Alright, so this mixer right here holds all of our effects. And you can see by all the levels being at 0 that we're going to use a similar technique to the time split. So we're going to use something to trigger these mixer channels to raise and lower, depending on which key we press. And what I found is a great device for doing this is Redrum. Since we can trigger Redrum by MIDI, it pick starts on C1, and let's push C1. C#1. So how does that work? Well, if we flip the rack around, you can see we've got ReDrum's gate outputs sent to the level CV in, turned all the way up, and it's just works exactly like the time split. So when we push a key, it triggers an envelope in ReDrum, which then sends its gate signal to the appropriate channel we've got set up here. One important thing to note is that there's two envelope settings on the ReDrum. It's decay modes. You can see them right here. And you need to choose the top one because the bottom one just sends a very quick pulse. And you can hear what that sounds like if I change that. It's extremely quick, and it doesn't wait until you let your finger off the key. This mode sustains until you let your finger off the key. So for every ReDrum channel that you want to use to trigger different effects, you're going to have to switch the decay mode to this top one. Okay, so let's flip the rack around and just see a little bit more how this works. Once we split the audio, it goes to different effects, and I'll show you what we've got here. Our first effect is a unison. Our second effect is a RV7000 set to this Rezo robot verb, which is just kind of a tweaked echo effect. It's a Reason factory patch. Our third effect is a vocoder, set up once again like a filter, and I'm not going to discuss that much, but so it's just a subtle audio tweak. Our fourth effect is a Scream 4 set to overdrive mode. Our fifth effect is envelope controlled filter that's actually controlled by the envelope of this maelstrom. So now let's hear them one at a time. So you have the Scream 4 there, unison, robot verb, vocoder, yes, that's right. Our fifth effect is actually some Thor filters. That are actually sequenced. So we can use more than one of these at once just by pushing two MIDI keys at once. So you could also use this technique as a time split, because if you went into the piano roll and sequenced some notes, well, well, that's a time split for however you sequence the notes. It's just not using the automated matrices like we did with our other time split. So as I said, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail onto how all of this fits together. I want you to have a look at it on your own and certainly ask me questions. And we're going to be talking about CV routing much more coming soon. And we're going to revisit this. If you can believe it, we're going to revisit an even more complex version of this. And hopefully this takes your understanding of reason to a different level in that there are dedicated VSTI plugins that do something like this, and we can do this in Reason without needing any of that, and it's so much more flexible this way. So it looks very difficult right now, but just have a look at the example patch, ask me some questions if you need to, and have fun with it. Just switch out the effects if you like. And if you come up with something really interesting, send it to me. Okay, I just got carried away jamming there for a bit. All right. Hope you enjoyed that on the key split, and definitely check out the included patch. So that just about wraps up our September 2009 Reason Wizardry issue. I hope you enjoyed learning about splitting, processing, routing audio in Reason. And I really encourage you to dig into those example patches and figure out how you can integrate that into your own workflow and sound design. So you're going to also notice a few bonus patches, and perhaps unsurprisingly, they're from our Synthetic Kits refill. You've got a little bit of a chance to hear that refill this month, and I didn't talk much about that in depth, but there's tons of info on synthetic kits on our website. The long and the short of it is that they're really, really configurable, extremely complex combinators that are focused on making new and original drum sounds, percussion sounds, using Reason's synth devices. So no samples inside. Check out those bonus patches, try them with the effects patches, and definitely check out the full refill if you're interested. Okay, thanks once again for watching. Questions, comments, still love to hear anything you've got. I'm Jeremy Jansen. Cheers.